Good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, as the case may be. I'm Jeff Butts from the Mac Observer, and this is Terminal Tinkering, the podcast where I tinker with electronics, hack away at older Macs, and find new and exciting ways to use newer Macs. In this fourth episode of Terminal Tinkering, we're going to look at a smart garage door opener and how it might improve the state of your life, the quality of your life, the way it has mine and my roommates. We're going to dive into VI, which is a text editor at the console level, at the terminal level. This is something you'll be stuck with at first if you install BSD on your Mac, so it's important to know how to use it. And we'll close out by talking about Clover Configurator, which is the app that I use to manage my config.plist file for the Clover bootloader. So with all of that said, let's go ahead and dive in and talk about that garage door opener because it's really cool. Okay, so what you're looking at is a picture that I took of the Skylink Adams garage door opener that I've got installed at my house. This is a smart garage door opener by a company named Skylink, and you might have heard of Skylink if you follow home automation or home security systems at all, because they make one of the most commonly installed smart home security systems. They also make this garage door opener, and if you can't tell, it is probably the smallest garage door opener I've ever seen. And that's misleading because it actually packs a 3/4 horsepower motor, which is one of the most powerful that you'll find in a residential garage door opener. Now, the Adams garage door opener links up with the Skylink Internet Hub, and that allows you to control it from your smartphone. You've got your normal remote control, button on the wall, all of that good stuff, but I can also control it and get notifications about it using my smartphone or my Apple Watch. And that's where things get really cool and quality of life becomes much better. I have an elderly roommate. He is 85 years old, and he's still very mobile, moves around a lot, but I like to know when he gets back home after he's been out so that I can just make sure he gets into the house safely and everything's okay. He falls sometimes, and I want to make sure that I can get to him quickly if he's fallen. Well, what's really cool is that this garage door opener notifies me whenever it's open, closed, or partially open. You'll see on this image, this is what it looks like when the door is partially open. If it gets stuck for some reason, when it's going down, or it gets stopped because of an obstacle, I'll get a notification that tells me it's partially open. I'll also get a notification when it's completely open, and I'll get a notification when it's closed, as you can see in this next image. This is really important, it's really awesome, and it's done a lot to improve how well I can look after my elderly roommate and make sure he's okay. The other really cool thing, and this is where the tinkering comes in, is with the Skylink Internet Hub that the Adams garage door opener talks to, you have a tie-in to if this then that, or I'll just call it IFT from now on. What that means is that I can tinker, which if you've been watching this podcast, you know that I love to tinker. So thanks to the if this then that integration, I can tinker to my heart's content. I can set up automations, I can set up conditions where if the garage door opener, if we forget to close it, and it gets to be 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, it will automatically close. I can set up notifications so that I can determine the state of the garage door at any given time. Without even using that integration, the other cool thing is that if I forget to close the garage door and I leave, I can just go onto my iPhone and close it straight from my iPhone. So it's really handy, really useful. I questioned the idea of a smart garage door opener, and so did my roommates for that matter. But now that we've got it installed, it's just phenomenal. We love it. We have a lot of enjoyment out of it. It's quiet and it just works. So that's the Skylink Adams garage door opener. I'll include a link to it in the show notes. Be sure to check it out. Now, let's go ahead and start talking about VI and what you can do with that. To start talking about VI, what I need to do is I need to get into the terminal. And I could do this straight from my Mac, but let's have a little fun. Let's explore VI on FreeBSD. So I'm going to log into my Power Mac G5. And here I am. Now, I've already copied a file over to play around with in VI. VI is a text-based text editor, and I say that you're stuck with it. You might be totally delirious with it once you learn it. The one thing to remember in VI is that even though a colonoscopy might not be a whole lot of fun, the colon is going to be your best friend in VI. So let's open up this rc.conf file and take a look at what you need to know, how you can move around. That's the first thing you need to know, is how to move around in files. You can use the arrow keys. I can arrow up to the side, down. I said up before, but you know what I meant. I can arrow down, I can arrow up. I can go right, I can go left. That works most of the time. If you find for whatever reason the arrow keys aren't working or your keyboard doesn't have arrow keys, then you can use H, J, K, and L. If you use J, that will take you down. J takes you down a line. K takes you back up a line. L moves you to the right. And H moves you to the left. I don't use those very often because I have perfectly working arrow keys and they make more sense to me. So that's what I tend to use. Now let's say you want to move forward a whole sentence. For that, you use your parentheses. The close parentheses will take you forward a complete sentence, and the open parentheses, which is Shift 9, takes you back. So Shift 9 to go back a sentence, Shift 0 to go forward a full sentence. You can also move to the beginning of a line, to the end of a line, or to a matching bracket or brace if you're using brackets and braces. To move to the end of a line, you use the $sign. I'm actually at the end of that line, so you can't see it. Let's back up a little bit, and you can see that jumps to the end of the line. And Shift 6, which is the caret key, takes you to the beginning of a line. If you want to jump to the end of a file, you hit Shift G, and that'll take you to the very end of the file. If you want to go back to the beginning of the file, you type the number 1, and then you type Shift G again, and that takes you to the beginning of the file. So that's moving around. That's one way that you can move around. There are others, but I'll go ahead and leave those out for now. Let's look at some other options. Let's say I want to know what the status of the file is, whether it's been changed, whether it's been modified, how many characters it has. For that, I press Control G, and I find out that this is unmodified. It's a read-only file, and it's a total of 750 lines. Now, even though this is read-only, we'll go ahead and show you how to make changes to a file. If you need to edit your file, you have total control over where your edits go. You can insert, you can append, you can insert before the cursor, you can insert at the beginning of the line, you can open a new line before it, you can open a new line above it, you can append to the end of the current line. So let's go through that one at a time. If I do A, that will append at the beginning of the cursor, like this. And then escape gets me out of that mode. If I do Shift A, that appends at the end of the line. So I can type, and then I escape to exit that mode. All right, now let's change things up a bit and delete. To delete, the easy way is to use, or the sometimes long way, is to use the X key, and that deletes one character at a time. And you don't have to escape after that because it doesn't change your mode. It just deletes the character. I do X to delete all of those characters. All right, now let's say I want to insert something at the beginning of the line. I do capital I and start typing, and again I escape to get out of that mode. If I want to insert before the cursor, so we'll say I'm right here on the O for not, I'll hit the lowercase I, and that types before the O. I escape and undo my changes using the X. Now let's say I want to delete an entire line. I just type DD, and the whole line goes away. If I want to delete an entire word, I'll go to the beginning of the word and press DW, and it deletes that entire word. I can also edit an entire word. I type CW, and I see the $sign show up at the end of the word. And let's say I want to misspell variable as variable. I just type my new word. When it gets to the end of the cursor, I'm done. I don't have to escape out of that. What else is important to know in VI? Those are the essentials. That is how you move around. That's how you add text. That's how you delete text. That's how you change text. How do you save files? Well, to save a file, make sure that you exit so that you get rid of any command that you're in. Remember I told you your colon was the friend? You type the colon, and then W to write the file, which it didn't work this time because it's a read-only file. If I want to write and quit, I do WQ, WQ. If I just want to quit, I type Q, ! if I want to quit without saving changes. Let's take a look at why this file keeps reading as read-only. Oh, it doesn't have write permission. Okay, so here's another tip for you if you don't know this. Changing the permissions of a file. chmod, and I'll do user plus write, U plus W. Helps if I give the file name like that, and now I can see that the file is writable by the owner of the file. I'll exit SU because the owner of the file is Clefmeister, and virc.conf. I'll make some more changes. Just because you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. I've probably mangled that lyric, but it's been a long time since I've heard that song. All right. So I'm done editing my file. I want to write and quit at the same time. Colon is my friend. W says write. Q says quit. And that's the end of it. That is a brief tutorial of VI. And again, I will include a link to an excellent overview of VI in the show notes, as well as what you see on the screen here in front of you. So that's it for VI. And now let's go ahead and talk about Clover Configurator. If you're not familiar with Clover Configurator or Clover, Clover is a bootloader that is essential to loading macOS on a non-Apple PC. Clover Configurator is what we use to edit the configuration for our Clover bootloader. So you click on Mount EFI, then you click on the correct mount partition, and you'll have the ability to get into that partition. You click on the Home button, and this will list config.plist files that it finds. You'll click on whichever one of those is appropriate for you, and then you're good to go. First one is ACPI, that's the first tab. These are patches that you might need in your system configuration. There's also fixes that you might need to use, various of those, as well as some other sometimes important options. Next is boot, and this is where we can set things like verbose mode, or Dart, which helps with virtualization, or Kext dev mode, which lets us load third-party drivers that otherwise we wouldn't be able to. Verbose mode is sometimes the most important one because this is crucial for troubleshooting. Enable that, it gets rid of the Apple symbol logo and shows you all of the messages that are coming across. You can also set your default boot volume, what happens if Clover encounters legacy mode. Boot graphics, don't do much with. CPU, I don't change, but you may need to. You might need to adjust the frequency of your CPU and how it reads to the Mac, the bus speed, latency, QPI, and so forth. Devices is often important. This is where we add properties that let devices that aren't supposed to work with the Mac actually work. You can see I have an Intel GFX property added. That turns on my Intel integrated chipset. Also various USB options here, inject, add clock ID, fix ownership, and so forth. Next is disable drivers. This can sometimes be important. After that, we have GUI. This is where you can set what theme you're using for Clover and some other things. Graphics, inject Intel will inject the Intel drivers. This is where you would enable your NVIDIA drivers if you have native NVIDIA drivers. This doesn't mean the NVIDIA web drivers. Okay, next we get into kernel and Kext patches. These are often important. We've got kernel PM, which is disables or enables kernel power management. You can also do patches to various drivers, patches to the kernel, boot patches, or force certain drivers to load. And sometimes there's important flags that you need to enable, like kernel CPU, Apple RTC, Intel CPU power management, kernel power management, and for certain Dell computers, Dell SM BIOS patch. RT variables, this is where you'll set your ROM value, your MLB number, your booter config, and your CSR active config. Booter config determines different boot conditions for your Mac, for your Hackintosh. CSR active config disables certain parts or all of system integrity protection. Now for the SM BIOS tab, this is where you tell your Hackintosh what type of Mac you want to pretend it to be. You can select your Mac model, the year, the family. You can set your firmware features mask, your SMUID, and your board serial number. Finally, we have system parameters, and this is where you can set a custom UUID, set your backlight level, or tell it what to do about injecting or not injecting Kexts. Inject system ID, and this is where you will enable NVIDIA Web, which is the web drivers that NVIDIA is now making for Macs. Once you're done, you save your changes using the sheet icon with the arrow facing out, or you can go back to the start screen. Quite often, Clover Configurator will save by default. So that's all for Clover Configurator, and that's all for this episode of Terminal Tinkering. Thanks for tagging along with me. Love having you watch the show. If you want to send me feedback, comments, questions, or suggestions, you can email me at jeffb@macobserver.com or find me on Twitter as @Clefmeister. Until next time, keep tinkering and have fun.